Photography was created in 1826 and since then has evolved through leaps and bounds, from pewter plates to film and currently digital. But there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than just pointing and shooting.
Hey guys, welcome back to That One Thing. Today we're here with Fontaine at Shadowbox Studios. We're talking to him about studio photography, what goes into it, and kind of a little bit of the background of it, just to see kind of what happens and give a brief overview of it. Fontaine, thanks for having me in today. Really appreciate you taking the time. Realistically, what goes into a good shot?
Well, the standard things, you got your composition, your lighting, and the main one, the connection with the subject. Those are the big ones. If you don't know your clients, you're not going to make great photos.
How do you mean about the connection?
I mean, like, know who your clients are. I think there are certain looks that work with certain people, and you want your client to also be proud of the images that you've created for them. So knowing who they are, what shows their best side, that's going to do loads for you. It'll make the images for you at the end of the day, because all your choices, your lighting, your composition are going to align with that client's personality and vision.
Everybody that wants to get into photography, I mean, everything nowadays, like even on YouTube and that, is all iPhone or, whatever they can get their hands on. But as a studio photographer, how much do you actually spend on equipment? Like what would be the startup cost for your studio?
Well, the studio, that's a whole different cost, because you have to worry about like monthly lease and like all that stuff. Like there's a lot of operating costs. But if someone was just starting as a photographer, and say you wanted to go in the studio, let's throw that in there, you can pay for a studio as you need it. Typically studios range from anywhere from $30 an hour to $100 an hour, depending on the studio that you want and what they include. It also depends on how much gear you have. Like if you don't have lights, you're going to need to also rent some lights from the studio you work with. But if you have your own lights, it ends up being very cheap. You can kind of go to any studio as long as it like fits the vibe you're going for. So I'd say like studio costs about, factor in about $100 for your session. And then the gear itself, like startup costs to start being a photographer, honest to goodness, it doesn't need to be a lot. My camera that I've used for years is nearly a decade old, and it still puts out really good quality. It's just knowing your equipment at the end of the day. So I think a starter photographer could get started for a few $100s to get a lens and a camera.
Just to get the basic setup going.
And then if you really want to play with lighting, I'd suggest going to a studio and seeing what you like before you start investing in lighting gear. I didn't make that decision. That was I bought a bunch of lights before I started, and that ended up being a good choice for me. But I know some people who have purchased lights and kind of just like be like, no, I'm more of a natural light photographer. I don't like the way it looks. I don't like lugging it around. It's a matter of like, but if you want to be a studio photographer, lighting is kind of key.
I know that your focus is more on studio photography, but brief overview of other types of photography, like wildlife photography versus studio or things like that. Like, is it a totally different setup or?
Well, I can only speak to what I do. So what I do primarily is people. So I guess that it's pretty much like, are you shooting people or are you not shooting people? That's kind of the question you have to ask yourself.
Okay.
If you're shooting people, there's a certain set of equipment. Like lighting is super important for people. You'll get different lenses that work for certain things. When you start getting into like wildlife or product, you're using lenses that you don't use on people.
Okay.
Like for product, you're using like macro lenses, and like I've seen people who do product and food photography that have like crazy rigs that are like use like bellows and changing the angle of the lens while it's on your camera body and all that stuff. So it can become a lot more complicated, and you wouldn't use any of that for people.
Okay.
You don't need that stuff. So I'd say, yeah, in wildlife you use really long lenses, like the 800 millimeters that can take a picture of a buck from,
half a mile away
kind of thing, right? So that's where those specialty lenses come in.
I know we talked about startup costs for, getting into photography and whatnot. What are in your opinion, what would be the possibilities to make a good living at it? Like, what would be required? What are the chances?
If all of my bills were paid and all of my and I like could feed myself and I was clothed and all of my needs were taken care of, I would shoot for free.
Yeah.
So when pricing and charging clients, it's hard to like justify your own prices, at least in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now I've lived enough and done enough work that like my prices make sense to me.
Yeah.
But I know that like it burns you out if you're not charging high enough because you feel bad about charging someone a lot. So like say you're charging $400 for an hour.
Yeah.
That feels ridiculous because you at your job, you know, your job before you did photography or that person's job that's hiring you, they make $30 an hour.
True.
Right? And they work 8-hour days. You're making their whole day in an hour.
In an hour.
It feels bad. But you have to realize is that like you have a very specialized skill set. So one thing that boils down to it is pricing. Once your prices are set at a level that you feel comfortable, the potential's there to make quite a bit of money. I think if you're charging $400 an hour and you're doing 2-3 shoots a week for an hour each, you're making a decent living.
Okay.
So I think it's a matter of like, as long as you get to the point where you're consistently booking, and then like obviously those bigger jobs come along. Like I do corporate headshots.
Yeah.
So I bring like, I'll do like an 8-hour day and shoot 40 headshots and make a few $1,000s. Those are really, really good for the books. But you just have to make sure that you're charging worth your time. Because if you were because you're not just charging for the hour, you're charging for editing time, you're charging for delivery, you're charging for all those, the sites you have, like the systems you have in place.
All the stuff in the background, not just sitting there going, next.
Yeah, because if it was just next, I would charge $10 an hour.
Yeah.
I would be fine with that. But there's a whole lot of work that goes into it. So that's why it's so high. But I think when you're charging like $50 for a shoot or even $100 for a shoot, I know people who do that. And in order to make what that $400 an hour person make, you have to work 4 times as hard.
Yeah.
So, and soon you don't have time for anything and you're not making any money. Well, you're working for minimum wage at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of pricing and building up your skills so you can feel good charging that price.
No, and that makes sense.
I don't think when you first start out, you should, like, obviously, I don't think, no one thinks when you first start out, when you're a beginner, that you should be charging, like, full-time photographer experienced rates.
Yes.
But I'd say that, like, working on your skills, build it and they will come kind of situation, build your skills up to the point where you can charge more, and then charge those.
No, that makes sense.
If you're charging the right amount for who you are, you will have a really good work-life balance as well as making good money. Everyone deserves to have images of themselves that they are proud of. Everyone deserves to have their memories captured. Everyone deserves to feel good.
How much time is usually spent after a shoot doing photo editing?
Well, I would say that it really depends on the project. There are times where a single image from a headshot session can take me a couple hours, which is a lot for one image, because if you were doing like hundreds of images, that would take you a year.
Yeah.
but sometimes it just depends on the nature of the image. If it's a family shoot, where they just want 30 images of their family being candid and having fun, that takes a little less editing. You know, you grade the colors, you do a little bit of retouching here and there. It'll take you, not too long, but like enough to just make sure it's right. Whereas like if you're shooting with a brand or like for a magazine, you're going to spend quite a bit of time on each image making sure they all hit.
There's always a big debate. Film versus digital.
There's no debate. Digital.
Hands down?
Hands down.
So a lot of people that I've talked to, they'll argue the authenticity of it, so on and so forth, of doing film.
Photography inherently isn't authentic.
No, that's fair.
Photography is capturing the best moments in a person's life or in a person's like experience. It's always meant to like capitalize on the best moment.
Makes sense.
If someone asks you to follow them around and they'll post whatever that you capture of them, and it's like a live stream of their life effectively, then sure, I guess there could be a debate for authenticity there, but like no one's doing that. right? So I think at the end of the day, it's like digital's more cost effective, digital's easier to share, digital is faster, and with the nature of how much dynamic range and how good the technology is, you can make it look like film. Now, people would say that's inauthentic, blah, 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 but film I shot film for a full year, in between when I started and like now. So like in the middle there, I got obsessed with film. Film's fun. Film's a blast, but not because it's more authentic. It's fun because the older technology is fun to play with. The not being able to see your images until later is very fun. There was a lot of community and camaraderie that I built with people who were film shooters, because instead of focusing on like, oh, I need to get the perfect image, you did your best, but instead of like, sort of stressing over it, looking at the back of your camera all the time, you kind of went, that's really nice. I took a photo of it. I guess we'll see if it turns out later. And most of the time was spent talking to like the person I was shooting with.
Okay.
The friend that I had beside me, or like whatever it was. I think if I, as a professional, shifted to film, I would quit.
How long have you been doing photography? Like, how long did it take for you to go from, zero to the point you're at now?
I think I'm in my sixth year.
Okay.
Fifth or sixth year. I can't keep track. I started when I was it's about 6 years now. And I'd say that like I didn't really get to where I'm at in terms of like skill level. I'd say it took me about 3 years. Okay. 3-4 years. Like I'm still improving every day. Every single time I shoot, I'm getting better. But it's just, it's the improvements are smaller because you've kind of learned a big mass of things. In my first year, I went from 0 to like hero. Like in my first year I shot for free, and then I started being like, okay, cool, now I'm doing it. And then I started working at the studio.
Okay.
I only shot for a year before I started working at the studio because I lived, ate, and breathed photography for a full year, just reading articles every day, shooting every day. And I always knew I wanted to do portraits, so I just kept getting better and better at portraits themselves. And then when I got in the studio, it refined me even further because there was a whole area that I was new to because I had never shot in a studio before. So about probably a couple more years in the studio, and now I'm just like comfortable being like, I could shoot anywhere, I could shoot anything, kind of thing, and still like retain my quality.
So specifically in regards to your studio photography, headshots, things like that, what would you say are your favorite shots? What are the best shots?
I would say that like my favorite images that I've ever taken, it doesn't even matter quality or amount of work put into it. It's the amount of, like I said in the very first question, it's the amount of connection I had to the subject. So my favorite image of all time has been the background on my phone for 3 years now.
Okay.
And it is, hang on, I'll just pull it up. I know that I'll send it to you so that you can put it up in the video if you want to.
Appreciate it.
But it's this.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? It's a picture of my daughter at 1 year old. And she is she's sitting in her mother's lap. We're in a field somewhere waiting for the fireworks to start. She was 1 year old. She was like 12 months, and she's just sucking on her fingers like a baby does. And I had brought like my casual camera, and I had put like a really interesting art lens on it, and I was shooting in black and white. And I took that photo, and then I was like, this is perfect. This is amazing. And it's the best photo. I feel like it's the best photo I've ever taken.
All right. Well, Fontaine, again, thanks for having me in.
Thank you. This was a good time.
I appreciate it. Like, this was awesome. Guys, thanks for watching. As always, all his links for his website and Insta and everything will all be in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all the usuals. And don't forget to put in the comments what your one thing is so I can do a video for you on it as well. Guys, thanks again for watching. Have a good one.
The other people will put out 600 images and you'll put out 50.
Just push the button really fast.